morning. Did you get your little clicker thing?
No.
From the front desk, they will get it for you. If you don't mind.
I'll get it for you.
Oh, thanks.
How do you like the iPad? Me too.
You got your clicker?
Yes.
I did.
Perfect.
Same thing as you.
You get a little clicker as well?
No.
Yeah, take one.
No. Apple could do better. There. That's very likely. Very likely.
Couple more coming.
Okay. Good morning. Did you get your little clicker device? Barb, can you bring some? It's going to be interactive. That's kind of the beauty of the innovation part. We're going to get Good morning. Jen, we're ready to start. Did you get your clicker device? Good. Sir, did you get yours too? There you go. Please come to the front. There's plenty of room here. So, master back there. We're ready to go. Is that okay or okay? Good. Good. So, good morning. Oh, come on, you can do better than that. Good morning. So, first on behalf of IMX and Kennametal, I want to thank you being here today. This is great to have you. What we're going to do before we get started, security in case of an emergency, exit door that way, navigate in parking lot, and hopefully it's not going to happen, but we got to do that. I also want to welcome the people that are joining us on the web. Thank you very much for being here and listening to us. We're live streamlining this. The only problem is they can't vote. So they don't have a clicker. So you guys got an advantage being here. Fast forward 5 to 7 to 10 years, grab what is going to happen in the industry we serve. Are we going to make aircraft out of plastic, cars out of magnets, those kinds of megatrends, and looking at what it means to our business and helping the businesses make sound decisions for investment. So when I think about future pacing, I look at sports analogy, and maybe you guys can relate to that a lot easier. If you're a fan of hockey, the coaches will always tell you, you got to skate where the puck is going to be, know where it is. If you're skating like everybody else where the puck is, you're going to miss the action. Those that are really good at this sport are the ones that go out there, anticipate what's going to be, and score. It's the same in business. You want to anticipate the trends, looking what's going to happen, and then make some bets. Sometimes you megatrends that we see kind of make you feel part of what we see, and then have a discussion about it. But I'd like to start with a little frame on what we're going to talk about. This is not blue sky stuff. Those ideas, those technologies I'm going to talk about exist. And when I think about Virgin Galactic, they won the Ansari Prize about 3 or 4 years ago now, maybe I'm dating myself. And Bert Rutan, the designer that created that aircraft system, used existing technology packaged in a way that made him win the game. So thinking different thinking is what got him up and won the prize, sending a man in 100-kilometer altitude back twice in 30 days. So he did it by thinking different and applying technologies in a way that made him stand out. And that's the purpose of what I'm going to try to do today. Questions. So, Tony, get there. When I look at 5 to 7 years and the materials we're involved into in this industry, manufacturing, do you think the materials we'll see in 5 to 7 years will be more difficult to machine, about the same as today, less difficult to machine, or essentially, who cares? They're going to be unshaped anyway. Can we cast your votes, please? 5-10 seconds. Tony? All right, well, that's pretty much consistent with a couple of days we've been here. Everybody kind of see the same thing, and I tend to agree it's going to be more difficult to machine going forward. And we'll talk about that in a couple of slides. So hang out on this thought process for a moment. Tony? I'm thinking about, is it more difficult than it used to be to find the right people for the right job? So I'm asking you guys the same question. Do you have no problem finding the right people? Where you live, what you do? Do you have some problem that you can manage around? It's very difficult? Or you guys are not hiring anyway, so no problem right now. So cast your vote, please. Thank you. All right, well, again, very consistent, right, guys in the back? Seen this thing all week long. It's difficult to find the right people for the right job. I'll be curious to discuss with some of you that don't have a problem, and maybe you have a magic recipe at the end of the show, if possible. Have some ideas on what you guys think, so I'll bring the question back up if we could. All right, Tony, let's go back to the main presentation. The next 5 to 7 years, and we'll walk through them as we go in the presentation, and that's the thread I'm kind of asking you guys to hang about with. The first one is around talent. We already kind of briefly talked about it, but I'm going to explain to you why is that happening and how can we mitigate that. 2 is the increasing complexity of our processes, our machines, our tools, anything that you can think about, the software, right? That's creating quite a bit of a problem out there for people that have not kept up with training and using the latest and greatest. And the last one of the megatrends I want to talk about is productivity and the need of being productive here in North America to keep the jobs and grow in a globalized economy, and also at the same time being sustainable about it, because the resources are scarce. The energy is costing more. We want to be green. All these things are going to impact our manufacturing sector. In the second row there, in the second column, 78.2 million of them. Did you know that they are retiring at the rate of 1 every 8 seconds? Yes. 1 every 8 seconds, somebody's taking retirement. Their age currently 46 to 66, and they're retiring fast. Here's a little problem for you guys. These are the people that look at the part in the shop, that look at the machine, and can instantly make a decision what to do. They've been there. They've been an apprentice before. They've been on the machine floor for years and decades. They know what to do. They're the good guys. They are the peers of your company. They're the brain power. But they're retiring. And if I may, there is 11% less of them that want to balance life and work, and there are less of them. However, there's the so-called, they're the best educated of the bunch. That's what they say. I didn't make that up. So you're actually going to compete against Fortune 500 companies to get those people to work for you. They are very scarce. They're not attracted to manufacturing because we haven't done a good job in doing this. They would prefer to work in services and places like, medical environment and so forth, rather than think about manufacturing. There was a good study done by Maypai, actually last week, about that. Manufacturing is at the bottom of the list of their first choice of employment, right before banking. I didn't make that up. Right. So how are we going to attract those people to come work for us? What's going by a very positive note. There is 100 million of Gen Y people, age 1 to 26, coming our way. I call it the rebound of North America, because this 100 million of people will want to buy stuff. They want to drive cars. They want to have food. They want to have homes. They want to be flying planes. They want to have babies. All that's going to happen is going to drive growth in a 5 to 7 to 10 years time frame. So we got to invest now to prepare for that. We want to invest so that we can produce at a reasonable cost. We also want to make sure we're going to attract those people to come work for us. And those guys are very, very, very different. Right? We'll talk about that in a few slides, because I want you guys to remember Gen Y across this. Those are people that have a very different, they are not I think about consumers, us, and driving what I call the mass customization of materials. I think about DC-3 back in the old days. By the way, I got 15 years of experience in the aerospace industry, so this is what I kind of relate to. When I look at DC-3, back in these days, it was one of the best airplanes out there. That makes thousands of this stuff prior to the Second World War and during the Second World War. Very efficient aircraft for its time. Would you like to fly into one of them today? Why? Because you want to fly faster. You want to fly at a higher altitude because you want to avoid, all the bumps in the air that these aircraft are flying into. You want to arrive on time. You want to fly long distance. You want to have one point-to-point transport. And it's kind of cool to be in a 787. They are green, not pretty, but they are. And you say, yeah, that's right, but about cars it's the same way. Who is driving a Model T today? Would you? It was a great car in its day. It leverages technologies and so forth. But you want to drive in a car that's going faster, that's closed up, that's air conditioned, has Bluetooth telephone, and has a sat nav in it, that has 8 cup holders, right? And consume less fuel per 100 miles or per gallon, depending on how you measure it. So that's what consumerism is about, is driving mass customization and difficult materials to machine, as we saw before. So I put this in perspective for you. If I look at what happened back then, we had 4 classes of material to choose. they knew what to do. Then came along sophistication and deviation from the norm. And you had a lot more, hundreds and hundreds of variation of alloying techniques and the materials to play with. I pose the equation for the future where I say it's probably going to be infinite variation and customization of alloys that's going to fit the purpose for the intended part. If I ever need a knee replacement or a kneecap, the material they're probably going to choose for me might be different from that of that gentleman because we're not the same build, we're not the same body structure. I craft the same way. Who heard of GE 1024, RR 1000, DA 718? Raise your hands. Those are materials that were made for a specific purpose for an engine manufacturer. Those materials, your machinist is going to say, what the? How do I deal with this? It's new. I don't know. Do I dial up, dial down? Do I change my tool, my processes? So Gen Y, the guys we saw before, they won't be patient. Google is right. Wikipedia is always on top. They must have the answer. And if you don't give them the answer, they're going to find it out from somebody else. So we as an industry have to make sure we can give them the information they need to make hay on those new materials when they come up. When I look at complexity, which was, remember, my second megatrend, I look at complexity. Back in the old days, simple machines, simple numerical control, and yes, you could carry the Kennametal book with you. And stop working the next day. Right? Remember those days? Nowadays, it's becoming a little more complicated. Them machines out there are very smart to the point that it's sometimes a bit of a daunting task. It requires a lot of training. My personal record is I found a machine through my travels that had 51 simultaneous axes of motion. 51. How do you make it work? You need a PhD in something to make it work, right? The most efficient way. That complexity is coupled with our own complexity at Kennametal, for example, and our peers in the industry, where we've engineered variation of cutting tools for very specific application and specific machines. We have hundreds of thousands of Scots of standard tools. We have millions of reference of custom tools. It was Italy, and I was meeting with the head of purchasing of Airbus, I think at the time, and since I was a bit new in this industry, I paid attention to the exhibitor's book, and I counted the number of machine vendors, 500 of them, cutting tool vendors, 400 of them, and software and coolant and services and you name it, fixturing, whatever else, another 500 participants. And I asked her, I said, you know what, how do you make sure you got the most optimized setup for your part when you make your purchasing decisions? And she looked at me and she said, we do the best we can, but at the end we pray. Because there is no system to make sure you got the right stuff. So when Gen Y is going to come in your environment, they're not going to have the patience to test stuff. It's going to have to work. Remember, impatient. Play with the buttons up and downs and listen to the thing and smell to it. No, 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 no. It's going to have to work for them to stay with you. Now look at productivity challenges. I want to pose an hypothesis here for a second. And when I reflect back on this right side of the chart and I look at manufacturing, in the past 2-3 decades we've implemented high-speed machining, all kinds of cool, lean, processes and Six Sigma and just in time and the Kanban systems and whatnot. We've implemented new machinery with bells and whistles up the kazoo. We've implemented new tooling. I posed the question in what is the next step there? The next plateau is going to be quite expensive. We're hitting a law of diminishing returns by taking all these next level and be differentiated and actually be conscious about creating wealth for this nation. The idea of focusing on process is probably going to get us there. And it's amazing to me. Every time Kennametal has the privilege to be invited to one of your shops and do a, optimization work, we typically generate 20 to 50% savings by just bringing what's the best out there to you guys. So if you have a moment, and my colleague, if you haven't been there yet, my colleague Mark Houston is going to be right after me talking about art to part and as the how this works. The whole idea is those that will be able in the future to take the best process, the best strategy for the part in minutes, days, instead of weeks, will then win the bid and keep the part. That's patient. They want to know today, not in 2 weeks. And you're going to have to make risks, which you don't want to do. So here is the deal. The ones that will be able to do this kind of stuff very fast and very accurately will then retain and grow the business. You follow me so far? And I'll talk to it about in more details in a few slides. So let's wrap this up. I call it the Moore's Law for a second here. If you're familiar with the computing industry, every year or two they double their performance for half the price. It's the same in manufacturing community. So every 5 years, I will submit to you that we provide about 30% productivity improvement in the industry by new machinery, new process, new software, new tools. About 30%. That's what I've been able to figure out. So again, back to my roots in aerospace, I walked into shops that have been doing this part for Boeing or Airbus for the past 15 years, the same way, using the same machine, the same tools and processes, because they can. However, 10 to 15 years is 2 to 3 generations of technology, meaning that if your customer, again, a possible Gen Y, is coming in the morning and says, I'm going to rebid this part, somebody in the world that has invested in the latest and greatest will undercut you by at least a third, if not 2/3, in speed and cost. If you're not kept up with the complexity and the productivity associated with it. So second point on this slide is cost pressure. Who doesn't have any goals of improving productivity year on year? Raise your hands. In this equation is people. And I'm coming back to it because I think it's the one biggest challenge for this industry. The people that will be able to adapt to complex settings while maintaining productivity will then be the winners. Talent is key. So when I look at the answer, is in 3 parts: the digital, technology, and partnerships. You can't hire an infinite number of people. That's impossible. And you can't find the talent today that has all that. It doesn't exist. So, if I ask you a question, what is the language of the future? What do you think? French? Not like that. Probably not. English? Maybe. German? And if you keep speaking drawings and 2D files, and they're not going to understand you. Your customers and your people, by the way. So we got to invest into ways of bringing those tooling characteristics to you in a digital way for Gen Y to adopt it instantly in their CAM processes or their machine controls. It has to be seamless. And if you want to pay attention to my right, to your left, I believe, there's a booth called MT Connect. I encourage you guys to go and see them. They're paving the way for it to happen. They're creating a language of communication between machines and tools and processes and software so that this information can flow freely. It's akin for me the USB technology for PC. I can plug a camera and it used to be when you had to program every apparatus that was connected to the machine. The technology is a no-brainer, right? You got to have the good enough products, technologies to make hay. I mentioned good enough, because if you have a machine with 51 axes and the customer doesn't care, you're not going to pass the buck. So good enough is probably going to stay with us for quite a while. So you get to think about it. This what I call the new era after the downturn of 2008 is the people, us, you, are being more conscious about the cash at hand and then want good enough specification for the intended purpose. So this is not going to go away. The last one is partnerships. I mentioned you can't pretend to know everything there is to know about every machine and every tool. And if there were, you probably couldn't hire them. I couldn't. So when I think about how to bridge the gap between now, baby boomers going out and Gen Y coming back, there is this period of time where you're going to have to rely on partnerships with a very few selected number of vendors, partners that understand you, and know what you're good at and what it is we can help you with. It could be in cutting tools, it could be software, coolant, it could be a distributor or partner. You pick and choose which one it is. But if your job is to make a part, you probably need to leverage somebody else to help you with supply chain elements. So partnership is going to be key for the future. And again, if you want to stick around for the next presenter, Mark's going to do a good job explaining how we do this at Kennametal. And so favorite slide. So I'm going to go back to A part. I pulled this part out of my library and I said this is a very simple part. It's a component that's made of aluminum, simple billet, and I'm going to ask you a question. In the future, how would you do this part? But first, we're going to say, how do we do it today? And today I'm asking, just got the drawing, right? I'm going to quote it. Joe, which machine would you use this to do this? Oh, I'm just going to say that one over there. It's available. It fits. Okay. Is it the right one? Don't know. It works. Then I'm going to go to Jane. Jane, design a process for this part, will you? How are you going to go about it? I'm going to turn it first and sure, it works. Then I go to the next set, and I'm going to go to Alfred in the back room and says, what kind of tools and fixtures do you have for me? I got this and this, should work. Cool. Is that the best? Don't know. Will it work? Sure. See where I'm going? What's happening here is a process that's very complicated, go from step to step to step to step, and people have their emotion, their beliefs. Most of the time they're right. If not, we wouldn't make anything, right? But how long does it take? Days, weeks. Anybody brave enough to tell me it works all the time, right the first time? Yes? Please. No, it doesn't. So the future is something like this. When I talk about technology, privilege to work with you guys. We bring hundreds of technicians' heads. We bring thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of experiences of having worked in the same conditions. And we can help you pick the right stuff. And I'm sure machine tool guys do the same thing, and I'm sure the software guys will do the same thing. But the idea of picking the right technology to document all those processes, to parameterize them, to standardize them, to have them more efficient, instead of reinventing the wheel all the time, and picking the right partner, will help you grab those people that want to work for the winners. That's what it is we're talking about, Gen Y. They need to come in a place where they can play with buttons and software. So how do we do this? My take on the future is you got to make it more intuitive than it is we do today. We got one. Did you read the manual? Did you? There isn't one. Is it a dumb machine? They can do a lot of stuff. They said they have 100,000 apps. They probably can run that 51-axis machine I was talking about earlier, right? So how come this device is so easy to use that most people from all the generations that talk about can just grab one and play with it? From babies up to, well, retirees. That's what we got to focus our attention on, and grab these types of technologies in our shops and make them talking to each other and make them more appealing to our future users. Investing quite a bit in this. We got apps for the iPads. We got applications on our website and more stuff that we can talk to you about when you walk in our booth over there. So, Tony, maybe we could do a wrap-up here. There's a question I want to ask you, because we've talked a lot about concepts and ideas and future visions. I'd like to ask you a question, because I want to know. With everything we've been talking about the past half hour, how many people are already doing this? Results? Wow, that is cool. So I'm glad that I see something is happening there. It's about consistent to what I saw the past 2 days here. I want to thank you for being here today. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. You can go in our shop here or stay with me and we can answer some of the questions you might have. Thank you.